This video is part 2 of our look at Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly. So if you haven't seen part 1, you should go watch that first, either here on YouTube or the longer, better, fuller version on Patreon. So if you've seen part 1, let's keep going. In the first video, I said there are 5 distinct acts to this album, and we looked at the first 2, which I called Conflicted and Messiness. We saw a young Kendrick get signed, get a ton of money, fame, and power, and see how ill-equipped he is for all of this. Uncle Sam is after him. He's abusing his power. He's being tempted by the devil herself, Lucy. There's also been a poem interjected in between songs, and each time we get a little more of the poem. When we ended Act 2 on the last video with the song For Sale, we were halfway through our storyline, which loosely follows the hero's journey, forming a circle. But these acts are distinct and self-contained, so we're visualizing that too. Here's where we left the poem. I remember you was conflicted, misusing your influence. Sometimes I did the same. Abusing my power, full of resentment that turned into a deep depression, found myself screaming in the hotel room. I didn't want to self-destruct. The evils of Lucy was all around me, so I went running for answers until I came home. And now we get into the third act, which I call Returning Home, starting with the song Momma. The song Momma is basically Kendrick coming home, a home being Compton or Africa or his former pre-fame self. He says he's done all this stuff and gotten famous and rich, but the best part is that all of this brought him back home.
Thank God for rap. I would say it got me a plaque, but what's better than that? The fact it brought me back home.
It's not home in the hero's journey sense, like his transformation is not complete, but he's home because, as we'll see, he has work to do. In the second verse, he lists out a bunch of things that he knows all about, even repeating that he, quote, knows everything 7 times throughout the verse. But then at the end of the verse, it twists. He says he realized when he came home that he didn't actually know anything.
I know what I know, and I know it well not to ever forget, until I realized I didn't know the day I came home.
I interpret this as getting to a point of knowing what you don't know. When you're young and foolish, you think you know everything, but when you gain wisdom, it's not that you actually know more, I mean, you might, but it's that you realize how much you don't know. It's a paradoxical truth of life. Before recording this album, Kendrick traveled to Africa, and this trip had a massive impact on him. So in the third verse, Kendrick is talking to a young African kid, saying they're the same, it's just that America and public schools and the system has made him forget about his heritage. Then, near the end of the song, Kendrick has a bit of an existential crisis, saying he's been looking everywhere for something, but hasn't found it.
I've been looking for you my whole life, and every time for the feeling I can barely describe. What you is it in a woman, is it in money or man?
This is an age-old story, and there are a million variations of it. One version I like is a beggar is sitting on the side of the road for years, asking for change. And one day a man comes by, he asks him for change. The man says he doesn't have any, but says, "Hey, what's that you're sitting on?" And the beggar says, "Oh, nothing, this is just an old box." "Oh, well, have you ever tried looking inside of the box?" The beggar says, "What's the point? There's nothing in there." But he finally opens it to find that the box is filled with gold. It turns out he had the thing he was seeking. He had it the whole time. Like I said, there's a million versions of that story, and it's a definite theme on this album. We'll have to see where Kendrick takes it. This song samples the Lalah Hathaway song On Your Own from 2008. Lalah has said that her father, Donny Hathaway, gave it to her in a dream, and here it is being sampled on this album.
So it seems, I need that sloppy.
The next track, Hood Politics, sees Kendrick dealing with survivor's guilt. He gets a call from a friend back home who kind of thinks he's big-timing him. Kendrick gets defensive, and this song unfolds. This song samples an artist who you probably wouldn't think of when you hear the name Hood Politics, Sufjan Stevens. At the end, we get more from the poem, but that didn't stop survivor's guilt, going back and forth, trying to convince myself of the stripes I earned, or maybe how A1 my foundation was. But while my loved ones was fighting a continuous war back in the city, I was entering a new one. The next song, How Much a Dollar Cost, includes vocals from Ronald Isley and James Fauntleroy, which is a similar pairing to the first track, Wesley's Theory, Ronald Isley being the legend and James Fauntleroy being the newer musician. Musically, it's just so good. Like on For Free, that was straight up jazz. We had piano, drums, upright bass, saxophone, and Kendrick in this frantic jazz song, right? Well, now at this point on the album, we have that same instrumentation, but it's come completely unwound. In the first video, we looked at other characters on this album like Uncle Sam and Lucy, but this song sees Kendrick interacting with another character, a homeless man who asks him for $1. And Kendrick, he's full of himself, he just lets this guy have it.
I never understood someone begging for goods, asking for handouts, taking it if they could. And this particular person just had it down back, staring at me for the longest until he finally asked, have you ever opened up Exodus 14? A humble man is all that we ever need. Tell me how much a dollar cost.
Exodus 14 is the passage in the Bible when Moses parts the Red Sea and leads the Israelites out of Egypt. And Moses, being a humble man, is who God chose to work through. Not a great and powerful leader, but a simple, humble man. This homeless man finishes by asking for $1 again. Kendrick continues to berate him, and the song finishes with this verse, revealing who the homeless man actually is.
He looked at me and said, know the truth, it'll set you free. You're looking at the Messiah, the Son of Jehovah, the higher power, the choir that spoke the word, the Holy Spirit, the nerve of Nazareth. And I tell you just how much a dollar cost. The price of having a spot in heaven. Embrace your loss, I am God.
I told you, this album is on another level. This act, which I'm calling Returning Home, sees Kendrick reconciling survivor's guilt and, similar to what we saw on Good Kid, renewing his love for his hometown. But he's also still dealing with his own pride and greed, refusing to give this man $1, which ends up being costly. This act largely has Kendrick dealing with external stuff, his hometown, a homeless man asking him for money, and Kendrick is going out into the world and seeking what he's looking for. The homeless man, who turned out to be God, hinted that he just needed a humble man to make him a great leader. And instead, Kendrick's own greed has angered God. So quadrant-wise on this story, this act is in the bottom left. We're circling back to the top. He's going to return home again, but first, we need more reconciliation. So I'm calling Act 4 Reconciliation. Let's start with the first song, Complexion. On Complexion, Kendrick explores beauty standards, specifically with colorism and its roots, which are tied to slavery in America. There's a guest verse from Rhapsody, production by Soundwave, Thundercat, Terrace Martin, The Antidote. Pete Rock is singing the hook. It's crazy. The production credits on this whole album are insane. So many producers and incredible musicians are involved. If I read all of them, that would have to be its own video because it's so many people. It's amazing. So do yourself a favor and look up the credits on this album. This song explores colorism and how America has taught black people to hate themselves because of the color or even specific shade of their skin. Kendrick further explores this idea on The Blacker the Berry, where he calls himself the biggest hypocrite of 2015 because he's so furious with how America treats black people, implying that the darker your skin is, the more likely you are to get killed. And yet, he reveals at the end he killed someone who was darker than him. Whereas Complexion feels positive, talking about beauty standards, and musically feels generally positive, The Blacker the Berry is the inverse of this. It's dark. Kendrick is angry, and rightfully so. He's angry at America, angry at these systems, and he's angry at himself. And then out of this, we get You Ain't Gotta Lie, Momma Said, which is a reference to the Tupac track Lie to Kick It.
You ain't gotta lie to kick it, my. You ain't gotta lie.
Huh. Tupac. Interesting. Anyway, the song is basically Kendrick saying that there's pressure to be a certain way, and he's felt that, but he criticizes people who think rap is inherently about money or power. In the third verse, he has the realization that being yourself is the best thing to do, no matter what. Self-love. Be who you are, because nobody is like you. This is our fourth quadrant. These four quarters make up a whole circle of the story, but there's still another act. Kendrick returns home a new man, having been transformed from a caterpillar into a butterfly, and it's time for him to pass on what he's learned. So visually, let's start another quadrant right in the middle of this full circle. This fifth act I'm calling Leader. This whole album, we've seen so much placed on Kendrick, but now we see him emerge as a leader, a butterfly, having been transformed by these difficult experiences. So let's talk about the climax of this album, the song I. The first single from this album was I, which samples That Lady by the Isley Brothers.
This is a world premiere.
This song is all about loving yourself and expressing yourself, being who you are, as the hook says,
And I love myself.
The world is a ghetto with big guns and dinky signs.
I love myself.
But they can do what they want whenever they want. I don't mind.
I love myself.
He said I gotta get up and I support the suicide.
I love myself.
One day at a time. Sun gon' shine.
Now, here's the thing about this. I was released as a single first, and that version is different from what's on the album. The album version is made to sound like it's a live performance. Kendrick is back in Compton performing for his own city, and it's mostly the same song until a fight breaks out during the performance. So this is the climax of the album because the song I, it's about loving yourself and being who you are and not falling victim to the pressures of who everyone wants you to be, whether that's Uncle Sam or Lucy or anybody else. This is one that you need to listen to in the context of the album to fully get. It doesn't translate well cutting it into this video because it's its own dramatic scene. But to recap what happens next, after the fight breaks out, Kendrick stops the performance and makes them stop, saying they've lost enough people already. He's trying to break the cycle of violence. He starts freestyling with no beat, spells out an Ethiopian word he learned while traveling the world, Negus, which means royalty. He explains that America has warped it and tried to divide them, reflecting on the N-word for a moment and teaching everyone at this show a new way to be. In other words, he's now a humble man leading. He's using his power and influence for good, trying to make a difference in people's lives, bring some positivity, and redefining words in a powerful way. And if you think about it, what was the very first thing we heard on this album? That sample of Every N-Word is a Star by Boris Gardner. He was trying to redefine that word in order to make it a positive thing, and that's exactly what Kendrick is doing at the end of this album. We've been on an incredible journey on this album, not only musically, lyrically, thematically, connecting things from the beginning to the end. This is art at the highest level. It's kind of impossible to overstate how incredible this album is, and we're not even done yet. The most incredible reveal comes on the final track, Mortal Man. On the first half of the song, Kendrick explores the idea of being a black leader, mentioning Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King Jr., and Malcolm X and how they were treated. He questions the loyalty of his own fans, and then the poem returns and finishes on the idea of respecting each other. Kendrick has structured this album like a movie that slowly reveals that this poem actually is the main scene. As he's reading the poem, we, the audience, get to dive deep into specific moments that are tied to a specific line of the poem, but the main thing all along has been Kendrick reading this poem to Tupac Shakur. And what follows then is a conversation between Kendrick and Tupac by way of a rare interview from 1994 that Kendrick has cut in. He's using audio from an actual interview pieced together with Kendrick from 2015. Tupac is a hero of Kendrick, so this fictional conversation where Kendrick sees himself sort of carrying on Tupac's legacy, it's incredible. And then Kendrick reads another powerful poem about caterpillars and butterflies, which basically sums up the journey of the album that we've just heard.
The caterpillar is a prisoner to the streets that conceived it. The butterfly represents the talent, the thoughtfulness, and the beauty within the caterpillar. They are one and the same. Pac.
But there's no response from Tupac, and the album ends. But all throughout this album, we've seen Kendrick's internal struggles, but also deal with so many external forces wanting to bring him down. And he's aware of the long history of the exploitation of black artists and black people in general in America. Loving the art, loving the product, but not loving the person behind it and pimping out the butterfly in order to get what they want. He explores that idea on multiple levels, with himself, with his city, with America at large. So the fact that he's talking to Tupac at the end of the album, and that's in fact who he's been talking to this entire time, that's powerful. Tupac had been on the same journey as Kendrick, dealing with the same issues, and Kendrick looks up to him. At one point, Kendrick tells Tupac that sometimes when he gets on the mic, he has an energy that he doesn't know where it's from. He just goes, and it sort of trips him out. And Tupac responds by saying,
"Because it's spirits. We ain't even really rapping. We just letting our dead homies tell stories for us."
And that's the last thing that Tupac says to Kendrick. So when Kendrick reads his final poem and Tupac is gone, we realize that the same is true here. Kendrick isn't even really rapping. He's letting Tupac tell stories for him. This gets really mind-blowing when you connect with the fact that Kendrick revealed that the original title to this album, To Pimp a Butterfly, was To Pimp a Caterpillar, with two spelled T-U, so it would spell out Tupac. I'm gonna pause and let the magnitude of all of this hit you for a second. This man is an artist. This video could be hours longer. There's still so much more to unpack. I catch new stuff every time I listen. If you liked this video, hit the like button. If you're not subscribed, the button is down there too. Kendrick Lamar's artistry is unmatched. His previous album, Good Kid, Mad City, is also an incredible album that is so cohesive in its storytelling. It's astonishing. But for that story, you've got to click here.